Thanks, Gabby, just recording there. So the theme is about expanding your mind, but it is a response to a very particular question that I've been asked many, many, many times, and you probably get it too, which is, I see my profile and I don't really have a preference for the blue. How do I do it? How do I get more blue? How do I access more blue thinking? So that's exactly the question that I want to focus on today. Full disclosure, I do have quite a terrible cold. So if I go on mute, that is because I don't want you to hear me coughing up a lung. But we will get through this today. I've got lots of tea and water here. And I think it's a really interesting and relevant topic. I can see a lot of faces today. I know you can't see them all, but give me a wave if that question I just said, how do I get more blue? Or how do any give me a wave if you get that question. Oh, everyone's waving. Well, that's why you're here, of course. So let's get stuck in. Overview of today. What are we here to do? To give you a response as well as some resources. So I've been working away in the background, putting some resources together to help you answer the question. How do I get, and I use blue as the example because a lot of my thinkers who come through my course, for example, are blue quadrant. And it's also the quadrant I probably need to focus on developing a little bit as well. But it could be any quadrant. Why is this important? Well, it's a really powerful way to keep the learning alive after a session to help provide some resources and structure to say to people, hey, look, there's more you can do. And you need to talk to it at two levels. So I'll sort of talk to the two levels today. One is at an individual level. So at an individual coaching level, give me a wave if that's you. You're working one-on-one with people through their profiles and you're talking through, and give me a wave if it's maybe one on many. So in a group setting or a team setting. Okay, so a lot there too. I might change my exercise. We'll see how that goes. That's okay. Who am I? I'm Rosie, for those who don't know me. I actually think I've almost met everyone here. There's a couple of people, new faces, so it's lovely to see you. I have been working for Herman for many years. This is my 14th year, and I love bringing whole brain thinking to your world so then you can take it into your context. My background is as a psychologist, and I really like to focus on the learning side of things. I also have a master's in education. How are we going to work today? So today is 60 minutes, and I've got one breakout planned. And we might do two, but we'll see how we go. The theme of the breakout can be repeated over and over again. I hope to teach you repeated patterns. So what I teach you, then you can go away and use again. If you've got questions as I'm going through, please feel free to add them to the chat. After the breakout, we will have an opportunity to share what we discussed. And this recording of this session will be available in the practitioner Facebook group. I don't know, Steph, are you there? Can you link the practitioner Facebook group in the chat? If you haven't joined the practitioner Facebook group, it is worthwhile because practitioners, there's some lovely contributions from your colleagues, your practitioner colleagues. And have you got an idea for this or an exercise for that? And we're keen to sort of not be too involved in moderating it and telling you what to do, but also getting you to share your ideas and exercises, because I'm only one person and you guys have a massive experience, which I get to hear about, which I love hearing about. Okay, that's our overview. Let's move right along. Hold on 2 seconds. Okay, so these are the questions asked of me by people like yourselves or thinkers directly, and feel free to add in the chat. So people say, how do I change my thinking preferences? They say, how do I access more yellow? Or how do I be more yellow? They say it in very different ways. What strategies can we adopt to get more whole brain? I hear the word strategies a lot. What can we do? What can we do to get more whole brained? And what strategies can we use in our teams, particularly to get more whole brained? Anything else? Anyone want to share anything in the chat? I'm just going to give a little second, or you could come off mute if you like. Is there anything else around this theme that is coming up for you? If you want to come off mute, you can give me a wave, and so I'll say, or you can fill in the chat. Have I covered everything that we get around this theme? Is there anything I'm missing that I haven't heard about? All right, let's move on because we're going to be answering those questions as we go through the session today. The interesting thing about cognitive agility and cognitive flexibility is the first idea of preference. So if you know me, you know I love this exercise, and I'm going to get you to do it again. Fold your arms for me and have a look down. You know, mine's right over left. I've been doing this for a long time now, and it still is right over left naturally. Unfold your arms, and now fold them again and put the other arm on top. Now, if you've been doing it as long as I have, they actually start to feel the same, and they start to like, even though I go default first moment, I go default. Now that I do it so easily, even folding them the other way is not tricky anymore like it used to be the first time I did it. And this concept of preference and flexibility is really critical to conversations around thinking agility and cognitive flexibility. So when people say to me, I want to get more blue, that's the first thing I get them to do. And I say, how easy or hard was that? And that gives me a conversation to open up around the shift. So, you know, another one that coaches use is, you know, who brushes their teeth with their right hand? That's me. I brush my teeth with my right hand. Now, it's a habitual pattern, and I just do it without even thinking about it. But sometimes before I even give strategies around how to think more blue, I say, okay, for the next 2 weeks or the next week, I want you to go and brush your teeth with your other hand. Because what that is doing is disrupting something in the brain called the default mode network. And it is about trying to look at the ease with which we can start to shift our preferences. And so we have that conversation. That's one of the early conversations I'll have. So what is it like for you to start shifting? Some people can shift very easily. Like, it's not difficult. They're ambidextrous, in fact. And so when we're talking about whole brain thinking, a lot of people think the end goal is to think flexibly, is actually to think, as this little picture here shares, as a square. But that's not the right answer. Cognitive flexibility is not about operating in all 4 quadrants all of the time. Cognitive flexibility is about accessing the type of thinking you need to access to get the job done in the situation you're given. And I had people come on the certification course. This one lady really sticks in my mind. And back in the face-to-face days, it was 3 days face-to-face. Many of you attended. I certified you in that way. And on the second day in the afternoon, she said to me, the whole reason I came to this program was to get more whole-brained and to turn my profile into a square, because that's what I thought I needed to do. And she goes, but that's not the point of this at all, is it? Absolutely. And so I was like, I wish you told me that when we started the program. But that's the type of mindset that can come when people focus on competence frameworks. I should be doing this. I should be good at that. I should be good at this. This is the ideal profile. So there's a bit of unlearning we sometimes have to do around the conversation of there is no ideal profile. And sometimes whole brain thinking is not the right thinking required for the situation. I think I shared this story recently in a forum about a client who came to us because they had a product that was being launched, and they realized that they didn't have a purchase button on the website. And so big problem. People, they were about to launch it the next day, but no one could actually buy the product. They put all this time and effort into the product, but no one could actually buy it because they'd missed that one step. Now, they didn't need whole brain thinking to solve that problem. They needed innovative yellow quadrant, outside the box, idea generation, solution focused, what if scenario thinking. And that's what they asked us to help with. So thinking agility and cognitive flexibility is actually not about going into all 4 quadrants. It's about going into the preference that you need to go into to get the job done. And so another point that I'll make here, hold on 2 seconds, is sometimes an exercise called mapping the task is an important first step. It's in the practitioner portal. You can just search mapping the task. And there's 2 different versions. There's a slide version, there's a handout version. Now, mapping the task is about looking at tasks that we do and recognizing the thinking that's involved with the task. So if I was to give you an example of a task I have to do in the next couple of weeks, because my husband's breathing down my neck, and he has been for many forums now, I have to do my tax. I have to do my tax. I have to submit it to the accountant, and I have to do it. What's the date? No, yeah, we're past October, but he's through an accountant. Now, I have to do my tax. What quadrant preference is looking at me right here? What quadrant, which of these, and you can put it in the chat. Oh, Steph's very kindly just linked for us the mapping the task exercise in the portal. Thank you so much for that, and the 2 versions. But When I have to do my tax, what is it that I actually have to do? Well, I actually have to get green. I don't have to analyze anything. I don't have to look at numbers. I literally have to collect data and put it in a spreadsheet. And I have to get all my receipts and I have to go through all my reports and that's the thinking that I need to do to get the job done. Uh, it's a pull for me. Now, how do I do it? I get my husband to sit next to me because I like the connection and the red quadrant engages me better. But this is what, when we're talking about cognitive flexibility, first, what is your propensity to be flexible? And can you do that? So that's the first question. Second question, what is the thinking that is required in the situation we're presented with today? Another question that is relevant to ask at this point is, sorry, just back to my questions, is when people say, can I change my thinking preferences, is, do you find your profile's not helping you? Now, obviously, profiles are designed to be facilitated in a positive way, and we really promote the benefits of the positive, helpful parts of a profile. But that is not to neglect or to negate the fact that there are people out there who find that they are trapped by their thinking style. And they find that it is actually not a helpful manifestation of thinking for them. And they are often the people that use negative words to describe their thinking. "Oh, I'm so emotional, I'm overly emotional, I cry at the drop of a hat," or, "Oh, I can just be such an asshole sometimes." Like, what do you mean by that? Well, I just challenge everything. I don't know what's going on, but I just challenge everything. And so how they describe their thinking is actually not in positive and helpful ways. So that's another reason why even within your own thinking preference and your own profile, you need to consider whether you are manifesting your quadrants positively in helpful ways or in unhelpful ways. And so the flexibility might not be related to your thinking style, but into a mindset shift about what each quadrant is bringing you and what each quadrant is contributing to the situation. Because your strength, in when you're going for a job interview, what's your biggest strength? And what's your greatest weakness? They ask that question. And often your greatest strength is also one of your biggest challenges and weaknesses. Definitely is mine. Love a good chat, can talk too much. Phone a friend when I'm in a trouble. Maybe I should use some pros and cons lists before I phone a friend. So that's another part of the conversation. Is the profile manifesting in helpful or unhelpful ways? And you really draw that out in the debrief by listening to the language they're using for their quadrants. And sometimes I even articulate all the unhelpful ways the quadrants could manifest. And we just map it on a flip chart or wherever it is, blue quadrant, how could it look in an unhelpful way? Get it out there. Okay, so let's now reframe it. Let's use the thinking agility and the cognitive flexibility to reframe it positively. So you can see that when people just say, how do I get more blue? It's actually not a very quick answer. There are parts to the conversation that you're going to unpack with them. I'm just going to pause there. I'm looking at time. Any questions about any of that so far? And give me a thumbs up if this is making sense. Anybody got a question that's come up for them? If you're nervous to come off mute, you can put your question in the chat and I'll refer to it there as well. Okay, so what makes it difficult to be agile or use cognitive flexibility? If you're into neuroscience, which I am, there is a process in the brain or a function in the brain called the default mode network. And I think, 2001, there we go, the date, I put it there. I've got some references in this slide deck about the default mode network, and I've got some technical info, which I might not go into, but the default mode network is activated when your brain is in a routine situation. Like driving to work is often a routine situation. Brushing your teeth is a routine situation. It's active in those situations. And so you might want to think of it as when you're sort of unconsciously doing something. So when I had my first child, one day I was driving to the shops to meet my mum. And the way to the shops was also the way to work. But I was on maternity leave. And I was driving to the shops, but I actually drove to work. And I parked in my parking spot. No, yeah, I parked in the parking spot in Gordon back when we were there. And I stopped the car and I'm like, what the heck am I doing? I've got a baby in the back. I'm going to work, but I haven't been working for. Do you know what kicked in? My default mode network. It kicked in because I was in a habitual pattern and my conscious brain just went, ugh. And I was obviously sleep deprived and dealing with a newborn. But that's an example of the default mode network. The default mode network is also important because it's involved in how we start to see ourselves. It's self-referential, so it's about the kind of internal voice we have. So we might say, and this is one that I'm guilty of, but I'm trying to change it. I'm stressed. I don't say those words. I'm busy. How you going, Rosie? I'm busy. That is a default self-referential response to a situation, and it doesn't tell me much, and I actually don't think it's even helpful. It would be better to say some positive things like, I'm doing a forum today and I dropped my kid at school and, I've got a bit of a cold. But so we use these sort of, the default mode network is sort of instrumental in creating our view of ourselves. Now, that can be things like I'm stressed, I'm busy, I'm anxious, or whatever it is, but it can also be things like I'm not creative or I am creative. It's not a positive or negative voice, it's both. And it is also involved in our routines and habits. So helps in the formulation, or it plays a role in the formulation of those parts. It's automatic, and the word self-referential means it's about it's a lens of how you look at yourself. Now, sorry, how? What do you need to do to disrupt the default mode network? Because if you need to access thinking agility, you have to turn it off. You can't access thinking agility and cognitive flexibility when your default mode network is on. You have to turn it off. How do you turn it off? There's 4 ways I'll get to later. Awareness, mindfulness, meditation, being in the moment, cognitive focus tasks. There are lots of other ways. I'll get to them later. Now, if you're interested to learn more about the default mode network, you can Google it. And I've got some references on it. But in the brain, it's sort of this automatic pathway. There's some big words there, which I probably can't even pronounce properly. But just to understand that it is quite important in the formation of habits. And so when people come to me and say, oh, how do I get more blue? I'm like, well, how are we going to turn off the default mode network? What are we going to do to make that happen? And it starts to and this is something that is shifting now. I hope the way you're hearing me talk, it's not going to happen in your first 3-hour session with whole brain thinking. It's something that's going to come up as you coach and work through situations with people. Now, what makes it possible to disrupt and turn off the default mode network? Well, you can actually change your default mode network. So if your default mode network is one that has very pessimistic perspective and is negative and is getting you stuck in a rut, you can change that. It takes time, but you absolutely can change it through neuroplasticity, Hebbian learning, which means that neurons that fire together wire together. And this is where you go back to the arm folding exercise. If you fold your arms backwards enough times, you can actually start to shift the connections in the brain. But it's not easy. And I'll give you an example. When 2014, hang on, let me get my dates right. 2011, I just started working at Herman. I was also working as a psychologist in a school, and I got chronic fatigue. It was really bad. I had to quit my job as a psychologist. I had to stop working for Herman, and I basically had 6 months, 9 months, no work, and then slowly came back to work a couple of days for Herman. And what was going on was a default mode network in my brain related to energy. One of the things that I had to do to get out of that default mode network and get better was meditation. And I was one of those people that fell in the category of I can't meditate. I had tried to meditate for freaking years and years and years. I knew it was good. Everyone had told me it was good. I know it's a good thing, like eat your broccoli. I know, but I just can't eat my broccoli. But I couldn't meditate. Now, this is something that I'm super passionate about on the side. I learned to meditate properly, not in the way that I was meditating. Even when I was meditating, I wasn't actually doing it properly. I was meditating in a way that wasn't actually switching off the default mode network. And through meditation and mindfulness and a lot of other things, I was able to switch off that default mode network and actually rewire it and change it completely. So much so that maybe next year I'm thinking of running a course, meditation for those who can't, because it is so fundamental to turning off these unhelpful patterns in your brain that if you can't do that first step or that mindfulness/meditation step, it's very hard to do the subsequent steps. Which is why my chronic illness was chronic, because I kept trying and kept falling into that same pattern. But change is possible with a lot of hard work. I liken it to riding a bike. I didn't get on a bike, and then I laugh because my son got on a two-wheel bike and just rode the first time. So he destroyed my analogy. But in most cases, you get on a bike and you have to practice and you develop the skills and you slowly build up confidence over time. That was like me in meditation. I wasn't of the category of I just get on the bike and ride it. But some of you might be like that. Some of you can do skills very naturally first time. And then different skills, different people. So how do we start to answer the question of how do I get more blue? Now, the first thing is to recognize the profile of the thinker asking it and to look at the profile that's in front of you. Now, saying how do you get more blue is not actually the question they should be saying. What the thinker needs to do is select a specific attribute of the blue quadrant that they want to develop. So how do I think more critically? How do I think more technically? How do I think more logically or analytically or financially or numerically? And it's the same in every quadrant. How do I think more action focused? How do I think more about safekeeping or planning? Or how do I think about being in control and in charge and taking charge of situations? So the first thing is you never want to say, how do I get more blue? Because it's just such a diverse array of descriptors. So with individuals, you want to pick a particular type of thinking that they'd like to develop. And I go for low-hanging fruit in a one-on-one situation. I go for something they probably already do well and pick a neighboring skill. Like if they want to go for logical thinking, if they want to go blue and they pick logical in their profile, I might say, well, how about we develop the skill of prioritization? Because prioritization is something that is a blue quadrant thing. It's about what order should I do things? What is more important over something else? So you've got to evaluate to prioritize. And so we might pick a neighboring skill. Now, sorry, 2 seconds. I'm going to get into the exercise. What I've done is I've created cheat sheets for you. They're going to be in the portal. They might be there already. I have to check. So for each quadrant, what I've done is I've pulled together 20 strategies in the A quadrant, in the B quadrant, the C quadrant, the D quadrant. So every quadrant has 20 strategies. They're only one lines. So blue quadrant, something you could do, focus on data, ask the question, what's the impact? Use logic models, practice critical thinking, read analytical reports, create pros and cons. So that's the easy bit. The easy bit is going, what are the strategies for the quadrant? The hard bit is putting the strategy in action for an individual one-on-one. So 2, 4, 6, there's 80 strategies there that you can go away in your own time, and I'll probably link them in the forum after. 80 strategies that you can go and have a look at. But we're going to have a practice of what we actually do with the strategies, because having a strategy and applying a strategy are two completely different things. So I've given you the strategy, what they could do. What I want you to do, and I'm going to put you into breakouts. How many people? 36 people. Okay. So I'm going to pop you into breakout groups, probably 8 breakout groups. And so you're going to be either in group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8. In your breakout group, if you're in group 1 or 5, you're going to imagine you're developing with a person one-on-one their critical thinking. You're helping them unlock critical thinking. Now, I'm going to do it randomly, so it might be a quadrant you're comfortable with. It might be a quadrant you're not comfortable with. We'll see what happens. In that quadrant, what you're going to do is you're going to use ChatGPT. You're absolutely going to cheat and use ChatGPT to see what it says, first of all. So in ChatGPT, one person in the group can do it. You're going to type in a question like, how do you coach an individual to develop insert strategy, mind mapping, critical thinking, empathy, primordial, I can never say that word, technique, in a 30-minute session as a coach? Or what are the steps involved? And depending on how you pose the question will impact the type of answer you get and how good that answer is. You can play around with it. And then what you're going to do is map what ChatGPT is suggesting about how you unlock this skill and strategy to our quadrants. So you're going to have about 15 minutes to do this. So I have prepared earlier for you a document, which I need to go and copy. And some of you might need to pop off. You're just letting me know. That's fine. No worries. So if you do need to pop off and if you can't participate in the exercise, probably a good time, now because I don't want to have any lone wolves. People like Tess last time. She was a lone wolf in her breakout group. Okay. Now, some of you might not be able to access this because of security permissions, but hopefully everyone in your group breakout will. So I want you to click on the link, and where you're being where you're being directed to. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to turn this off. Oh, Rosie, I gave an example. So sorry, brain's a bit slow today. So I did an example. Okay, I did an example. I went into ChatGPT and I said, I can't remember the exact question. How do you develop mind mapping with an individual one-on-one when you've got 30 minutes? What would you do? Give me an outline. And this is what it gave me. Like, some's great, some's not. But it speeds up the process. Now, what I want you to do is the same thing. How do you develop the technique of empathy with someone one-on-one in 30 minutes? And you're going to go through it and you're actually going to go, oh, this is interesting. They're saying set the purpose. That's the big idea. That's yellow. They're saying clarify expectations. What do we expect? That's blue thinking. And what you're going to do is copy and paste it into the document. Oh, good. Lots of you are in there. This is wonderful. Now, so this is the critical thinking breakout. This is critical. So if ChatGPT says define critical thinking, well, then you're going to put it in the blue and copy and paste it and say define critical thinking. And then do the same with the rest. And this is a strategy in itself to help get you thinking about ways to take an idea like mind mapping is a way to unlock yellow, but what do you actually do to unlock mind mapping? What are the steps involved? What are the processes involved? How do you do this? And so then you can map that with a group. So I'm just going to prep the breakouts. Now, come off mute if you need any more clarity there. Six, seven, eight. Oopsie. Okay, so there's only going to be 3 to 4 people per room because it's easier to work in a bit of a smaller group. Now, I'm about to open the rooms. Don't join them straight away. You'll get a pop-up. Don't join them straight away. So I've just opened the room. Now, if you're in room 1, come back. Apologies for that very quick exit. I thought you had a minute countdown. It was 10 seconds today. So that was a very quick whip back into this room. Now, I'm actually going to get one person from each group to share. And what I'd like you to share is rather than, and I've got the stuff that you captioned on the screen, rather than the answers to the questions, what happened during the exercise? Second part of the question, what does it teach you as a facilitator? What happened during the exercise? What does it teach you? That's what I'm more interested in. But as we go through that, I'll just scroll. Now, what I'd like you to do is volunteer yourself if you would like to be that person. Thank you. Who was that? Was that
Tom?
Tom
or Sarah?
Tom or Sarah. Wonderful. And are you guys room 6?
Yep.
Yeah, room 6. So I'll start with room 6. So if you'd also like to volunteer yourself, go for it. Otherwise, I'll just volunteer you. Thanks, Tom. Go for it. So what happened in the exercise? What does it teach you?
Well, firstly, I hope the guys don't mind me jumping in, but we were asking that question when we got kicked out, so I thought I'd volunteer myself.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
What happened is, we followed the instructions and we jumped into an AI. We used Claude and we got this whole pile of data.
Yeah.
And then we really quite methodically just started working through the points and saying, well, overall that bit's green, but there's some red bits in there. So we started picking apart where all of these actions came from. We didn't get to critiquing the actions at any point.
Yeah.
So going through that piece of the process took a lot of time. Tiny bit of feedback, Rosie. It was really difficult because we kept jumping around because there were so many people in the document. So
yes,
point. So we managed that process, but really just as a group, we went through and said, okay, well, this bit's blue, this bit's yellow, this bit's red. So it got us to stop and think about which area, which preference we were asking somebody to access in going into that thought process, which I'm speaking for myself, I thought that was quite mindful and pretty valuable to do. So, okay, we'll slow this down a little bit. We then, so I think that's what happened, and we just sort of jumped it all down.
Yeah.
What did we learn? We didn't discuss this, so this is what I learned, was that a number of the chunks in what ChatGPT gave us had different quadrants in it.
Yeah.
So even the action planning piece had some green and some yellow and some red and some blue, I think, but there was always bits of everything everywhere. So there wasn't actually, no, there were a few things that were very clearly green. Okay, so
Yeah. Yeah.
define the technical, make the plan. But a lot of times you jump back into yellow to think about some solutions or synthesizing, having problems ready to, having solutions if things didn't work out during your action plan, as an example, was something we thought might be quite yellow. I didn't feel like there was a lot of red in what ChatGPT dropped out. Maybe that means that the red bit is the overall human interaction over this data. I don't know if any of the other two want to add anything to that or any questions, but that's sort of what I found.
Thank you. That's a wonderful summary. Thanks for sharing and thanks for jumping in. I'm going to jump to room 8 to get Elaine. Would you mind sharing for room 8 what you guys, what happened and what did you learn? I'll just go jump down there, room 8.
Do you know, it's really interesting because, Rosie, my reflection on the activity was more about how we operated as a group. So my whole brain thinking that came on and I was like, well, first of all, some red thinking came up because we all introduced ourselves to each other and, what we do, who we are. So there was some real red whole brain thinking. Jess, I think it's interesting because, Jess, you shared a little bit about your own thinking preferences. And I certainly saw some of the fabulous green organizing us, getting us into the document, getting us going. And Teona was really brilliant to leveraging the ChatGPT and getting us working. Unfortunately, we spent so much time on that. I don't think we got terribly far in the task. We only really got to the first line of what we found in ChatGPT. But similar to you, Tom, it seemed even just in that first line, there was a mixture of different, we saw some blue, we saw some green. We'd already identified, we actually need some yellow. What's the purpose? Why would you mind map? The person needs more than just what it is and how to apply it. They also need to know why it's important, how would they use it, etc. And that's about as far as we got, wasn't it, team?
No, that's wonderful. I mean, exercises themselves are not often about the end result of the exercise. They're actually about the learning that happens through the exercise and the reflection of the process. And it's something you can replicate. Like when groups say to you, oh, how do you get more green or blue? Or how do we, think more creatively? Well, let's start by asking ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So this is something you can actually use in your own sessions quite quickly as a way to start reframing and then debriefing what happened. Thank you for sharing. Let's go.
No, and I was going to say, Rosie, one other interesting reflection just about preferences that you don't prefer. I mean, I hate leaning into green. And, I'll avoid it at all. I'm the procrastinator on tax and anything admin related. But the ChatGPT, having something down on paper already and having a form to, a process that you had created, it sort of forced getting going with that. So I found that in itself was an enabler for me to expand my mind into green. So thanks for sharing that tool.
Yeah, as a strategy. Jess, go for it.
I was in Elaine's team. I just wanted to say what really came out also with ChatGPT was like we had with the first speaker, it gave you a lot of different quadrants in each step. So you had like some red points, some blue, some green. What the whole brain does for me is it gives me a way of organizing my thoughts or my actions in the quadrants. So I can, if I'm working with someone who's very green or blue, I can really make sure I cover those points. Or if I'm working with a whole team, I can really make sure I systematically or in a very logical way go through each of the quadrants to make sure I've covered everything.
Yeah,
Whereas
absolutely.
in ChatGPT, it sort of was more blended. So you may not necessarily see each quadrant in its own right. It's all sort of a blended it's not as organized or neat, if that makes sense.
So yeah, it's an interesting exercise because it's actually starting with the detail and then mapping it rather than what I've normally done, which is here's the model, now start filling in the quadrants with what you know. I've actually started detailed, which is a strategy in itself. I've gone detailed. Like ChatGPT gives a lot of detail. And that's not my favorite place to be all the time, but it's an interesting process. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, I'm going to move on to room 7. Margaret, would you like to share what happened? What did it teach you in the group?
Yeah, thanks, Rosie. Yeah, Steph and I was fortunate to be paired with Steph because she did a lot of the hard work. I was still catching up on GPT and how to use that. So, so thanks, Steph. So yeah, I certainly, I think we found that, we, like other groups, found there's a lot of information, and we were trying to sort of obviously source which, activities and ideas fitted into the relevant quadrants. I think, yeah, it is as much about the exercise or more about the exercise than the outcome in a way, because obviously we can all read and we could source that information if you gave it to us. But I think, yeah, working with others who have different skill sets other than your own, you really learn quickly. And so that was great. And just sort of being able to, obviously, as we all do in these exercises, bounce ideas off each other and can validate each other's thoughts as to where they, the activities fitted in the different quadrants helped our understanding of the time pressure, I would say too. Yeah. So.
Yeah,
and the other thing that we also did, well, I did at the start, was I jumped into 2 different chat GPTs because we obviously have the AI bot on our Herman AU website. So I used that. And then I also used chat GPT, and we looked at the difference and how they also crossed over and where they were saying real similar things as well. So that was also very interesting in our breakout room.
That's a nice bit of analytical thinking there coming out, Steph. Thank you so much for that. Great to share. I'm going to go to room 5 now. Haley, would you mind sharing? You're still there.
Thing. I'm still upside down, so I'll leave my camera off. Yeah, no, it was a great exercise. We found, I think hopefully the others will agree, we tended to group some of the information into, we figured out the themes around the how and the who and the why and the what. And I think that's kind of where we ended up putting our pieces of information. I think for our group, we found that most of the topics or the steps that ChatGPT provided had more of a theme of each color per step, perhaps a little bit different to what other groups found.
Right.
But yeah, and just a reflection for me as well, I'm just sitting here too. We had the question originally, as it was phrased, posted in ChatGPT, and we were following that. And I also had my phone here, and I did a shortcut question, which was how to coach someone to develop their critical thinking. So it just a reflection. It depends how you ask the question as well, right? Or how you frame the question.
Yes.
The type of information that you're going to get out.
Yeah.
So it's just a reflection of my thinking style and what comes out and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, how you ask the question is super, super important.
Yeah.
Let's go with room 4. We might just a quick share because we're running it. Some people need to leave for subsequent meetings, so that's fine if you need to, or we'll make the recording available. Christina, are you sitting around? Can you share what happened in room 4?
Sure. I was with Paula and Prue, and just build off Steph's comment before, Prue also suggested Claude.ai as an alternative to ChatGPT. So it's CLAUDE if you're not familiar. Maybe just a different way to look at it. We compared the two, similar to another group. And then we found that we had our chat because we're all people at the beginning, and then found those echoing the same comments as the first couple of groups, trying to find bits within each section that fitted into each of the quadrants. We took a section each, and then we tried to get through it because of the time constraint, but then found it a bit challenging to try and really check ourselves and make sure it was correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing. I'm going to go to room 3, Jenny Lee, because I think the others may have dropped off. anything additional to share that hasn't been shared already?
Just at the activity itself. So we did what everybody else has done, but we were room 3. But what we found was the other group that were doing the same one as us were filling in the room 3. So if you go to room 7, you'll
I was like, I filled out your one. I'm so sorry.
No, it was great.
It kept jumping, and I was like, oh God.
And look, we had that sort of confusion at first, and then we realized what was going on, and we realized that then it was actually better just to go to your one because we got exactly the same answers. So we obviously put the same query into ChatGPT, which is fabulous. You did a lot more work than us because we were sort of caught up in the detail side of things. But once we got our eye in, we were really quick to go and to pull together the information and to look at just one aspect, which was active listening, and how we could then explain that to deep people from the different quadrants as to what the value is in that, you know, so walking them through Hebb's law, blue quadrant, green quadrant, talking about a process for active listening. Red quadrant is, you know, how it builds relationships and so on. And the yellow quadrant is how can we make it fun for people to do that, engage with the active listening. So yeah, whatever's been said before, same deal.
Thank you. All right, I need to apologize to rooms 2 and 1. I'm going to wrap up the sharing there because I know people have meetings to go to. So apologies for that. But I just want to kind of summarize by saying that exercises like this are a strategy in themselves. Okay, so you can, when you're trying to develop these strategies, just as a wrap up, go back to my slideshow. That was individual though. Remember, I'm talking individually. How would you do it? You can also do it in teams. Now, when you're doing it in teams, my suggestion, and you'll see the resources in the portal, is actually around modes of thinking, not quadrants of thinking. How do you unlock convergent thinking or abstract thinking? And there's, because teams looking at individual differences, it's better to look at modes and strategies for modes. So same thing with your teams. I've given you 20 strategies for each mode of thinking for a team. So you can see those in the portal and have a look at them. And again, it says, you know, here's an example, speed dating or idea speed dating. And then you take that idea and you break it down into a strategy and into the steps involved into that strategy. So to kind of wrap up, when you're talking about cognitive flexibility and you're answering the question about how do I think more blue or how do I access this, say, oh, here, I've got 20 strategies for you. But then you have to say that let's think about it in a whole brain way. I like to start red because it's my first quadrant in order. What is your motivation to do this? You know, are you picking a quadrant or an attribute or an exercise that is something you're intrinsically motivated to do, not because you've been told to? That's the first step. You need to pick a strategy that you are motivated internally to pursue. Secondly, you obviously have to buy into the why. And I saw in your feedback, like when you were capturing the data, many of you actually highlighted the why being important. Blue quadrant, energy is not infinite. What that means is you don't have excessive amounts of energy to spend always in one quadrant. So manage your energy. When you do step into a quadrant that isn't a preference, you take more energy to do that. So you need to consider how you manage that energy to do that. It's like if you stretch a rubber band too much in the direction it doesn't like to go, it will snap. And so you've got to manage that expectation of how you move into these strategies. And the steps, like what you actually do, which is where I sent you today. And what would the steps involve? What does ChatGPT tell us? And what is good in it and what is not good? And we had a chat about that. The steps can look different. And so sometimes you can start from scratch with your own plan, but sometimes you can actually use ChatGPT or something similar as a way to say, well, what is it saying about the steps and about the structure? And use ChatGPT in the quadrants you don't prefer. Like there's another AI called Perplexity or Complexity, or I can't remember, but it's one around research and data and evaluation. I like that one because it's got a bit more of a blue tinge to it. It says, give me some research papers on blah, 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 blah. So you can actually use ChatGPT to help you yourselves unlock the thinking that you need to unlock. Because if you can't do it, then your thinkers and your teams can't do it. So the first step is to start with yourself. Work on yourself, start to disrupt that default mode network in your brain and start to, I guess, think about ways you're going to move that forward. So I will wrap up there. I had a couple more things on default mode network, but it's reading. So I'll just share though. How do you inactivate your default mode network? These are not strategies related to whole brain thinking per se, but when I looked at them, I'm like, oh, interesting. They map. Mindfulness and meditation is one way to disrupt your default mode network. Engaging in focus tasks. So the task you just did just then, that was a focus task. That is another example of disrupting it. Cognitive reframing. So changing your lens. very yellow. And the physical movement and breaks, like actually just stop your body and do something different with your body if you find yourself getting stuck in that pattern, in that habitual response, in that moment where you need a different type of thinking. Get up, go for a walk, go hug a tree. I'm not joking, it does help. There are different things you can do to just reset. Sorry, going 2 minutes over. Thank you so much for your time today, for your sharing, for your work in the breakouts. There's a lot on you, but hopefully some great insights and learning happened today. As I mentioned, those resources are in the practitioner portal. You can see them all here, how to develop the blue. So with all those 20 strategies, they've just been uploaded for you. Have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you next time.